If my regular driver had taken the standard exit that rainy Tuesday night, I would have unlocked my front door and stepped directly into a trap designed to make sure I never woke up. My name is Clara Vance. I am 62 years old, and for decades, my life was defined by predictability. I spent 35 years working as a meticulous records clerk for the county, while my late husband, Arthur, taught literature at a local college. We lived an ordinary, beautiful life in a modest, craftsman-style home in an older neighborhood of Seattle, a place we bought when the mature oak trees on the street were still just saplings. But 2 years ago, cancer stole Arthur. Shortly after, the mounting medical debts and a sudden spike in property taxes forced me out of retirement. Grief is expensive, and the world doesn't pause its billing cycle just because your heart is broken. To keep the house, I took a graveyard shift at a private legal archive downtown. It wasn't a standard office. It was a highly secure repository storing sensitive civil litigation files, sealed financial audits, and chain-of-custody evidence for high-stakes lawsuits. My job was simple but demanding. Verify document logs, cross-reference digital scans with physical originals, and flag any discrepancies. Ending my shift at midnight meant the city buses were no longer running. Walking alone through the dark, fog-heavy streets of Seattle wasn't an option for a woman my age. At my daughter's insistence, I reluctantly downloaded a ride-sharing app. That is how I met Julian. Julian was in his early 50s, a man with deeply lined features and a quiet demeanor that instantly put me at ease. He drove a spotless, dark sedan and possessed a flawless driver rating. He never pried, never forced small talk, and always waited until I safely crossed my threshold before driving away. Over the winter months, Julian became my regular driver. To show my appreciation for his consistency, I started bringing him a travel mug of hot chamomile tea every Tuesday and Friday. It was a small, human gesture in a life that had become profoundly lonely. By January, those 20-minute rides were the only time I spoke to another person face-to-face outside of work. Julian memorized my routine. He knew exactly how long it took me to walk to his car, and he knew the exact layout of my dark street. But as I sat in the back seat one stormy night, watching the familiar exit from my neighborhood flash past the window, Julian suddenly accelerated. My heart skipped a beat as he locked the doors. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, his face pale, and uttered 5 words that made my blood run entirely cold. What did Julian see waiting in the dark outside Clara's house, and why was her routine suddenly a death sentence? "Don't look back, Clara," Julian said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that barely carried over the sound of the rain drumming against the roof. "Just look at me." I stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, my hands freezing against the warm travel mug of tea in my lap. The central locking system had clicked shut with a definitive, heavy thud. We were moving at 50 miles per hour down the dark interstate, leaving my neighborhood entirely behind. Panic, sharp and immediate, flooded my chest. "Julian, you missed the turnoff," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Where are we going?" "Open the doors." "I can't do that," he replied, his eyes darting to the mirrors. "If I dropped you off at your front door tonight, you wouldn't have made it past the porch. I need you to trust me. For the past 3 weeks, someone else has been paying very close attention to your routine." He swerved into the parking lot of a long-abandoned, poorly lit strip mall, pulling the dark sedan beneath the shadow of a broken neon sign. He cut the headlights, but left the engine running. Turning around in his seat, his face etched with genuine exhaustion and worry, he held up his phone. "I didn't want to scare you until I was certain," Julian explained softly. "But driving nights teaches you to read people, Clara. You learn to listen to what passengers say when they think you're just a piece of the dashboard. Last week, I picked up a man downtown. He was furious, barking orders into his phone, talking about a stubborn old clerk in the legal archive who was digging too deep into old liability files. My breath hitched. The audit. For the past month, my supervisor had me double-checking archived settlement records for an upcoming corporate fraud case. I had found dozens of missing physical files and heavily altered digital entries, subtle changes that rerouted millions of dollars from vulnerable plaintiffs. He explicitly said your street name, Clara, Julian continued, his voice dropping an octave. He said you were becoming a liability. He knew exactly what time your shift ended. Tonight, before I picked you up, I drove past your house to check. There was a silver SUV parked directly across from your driveway. No lights on. A man was walking up your side path toward the back door. A cold sweat broke out across my neck. I suddenly remembered finding my backyard gate unlatched 2 days ago and a notebook missing from my kitchen counter. I had rationalized it all as my own forgetfulness. But as the rain smeared the windows of Julian's car, the horrifying truth began to crystallize. Julian pressed a button on his phone, playing a short audio file he had recorded for his own safety. A harsh, aggressive male voice filled the quiet cabin of the car, sending chills down my spine. Who is the man in the recording, and how deeply does this conspiracy run inside Clara's own office? The harsh voice from the phone speaker seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of the car. I couldn't breathe. The air in the vehicle suddenly felt entirely too thick. I know that voice, I whispered, my fingers gripping the car seat so tightly my knuckles turned white. Julian, that's Marcus Vance. That's my late husband's cousin. Julian's eyes widened slightly. Your family? Not family. Not really. I stammered, the pieces of a terrifying puzzle slamming together in my mind. Marcus is a senior partner at the law firm that handled Arthur's estate. When Arthur passed, Marcus was the one who managed the medical settlement paperwork. He was the one who told me there was barely any insurance money left. He recommended me for the job at the archive building. The realization was like a physical blow to the stomach. Marcus hadn't gotten me the job out of charity. He had placed me there. He knew the archive was a labyrinth of millions of pages of paper, a place where old secrets were supposed to go to die. But he hadn't counted on my decades of experience as a county records clerk. He hadn't counted on my habit of checking the physical chain of custody logs instead of just trusting the digital screens. The files I flagged during the audit, I said, my voice rising in panic. They weren't random corporate fraud. They were old maritime injury settlements and estate closures managed by Marcus's firm. Millions of dollars meant for widows, injured workers, and grieving families. It was all being quietly rerouted into offshore holding accounts. He used his access to alter the archives. And he thinks you have the original paper ledger, Julian said, looking out into the rain-slicked, empty parking lot. The one document that proves the digital files were forged. I don't have it. I cried out, tears finally blurring my vision. I left it on my desk locked in a secure cart. But I did write the serial numbers down in my kitchen notebook. The notebook that went missing from my counter. Julian's jaw tightened. He shifted the car back into drive, the transmission clicking heavily. If Marcus has your notebook, he knows you're onto him, Julian said grimly. And if he has a man waiting at your house right now, they aren't looking for the ledger anymore, Clara. They are looking to silence the person who can read it. He hit the gas, the tires spraying water against the concrete as we tore out of the abandoned strip mall. Where are we going? I asked, looking back in terror at the dark highway. The police? We can't just walk into a precinct with a random audio recording, Julian replied, his voice deadly serious. Marcus is a powerful attorney with deep roots in this city. If we don't have absolute, undeniable proof of what he's doing right now, his lawyers will have this thrown out before morning. We need to catch them in the act. What dangerous gamble does Julian propose to trap Marcus, and what is currently happening inside Clara's dark, empty home? Julian didn't head toward the local police precinct. Instead, he drove deeper into the industrial grid of the city, navigating the rain-soaked alleys with a calm, terrifying purpose. We need leverage, Clara, Julian explained, his eyes locked on the dark road ahead. My car has a high-definition dashboard camera that records a continuous feed to a cloud server. We're going to drive back to your street, but we aren't stopping. We're going to capture the license plate of that silver SUV and the face of whoever is waiting on your property. Once we have visual evidence of an active break-in combined with this audio, Marcus won't be able to bribe or lie his way out of it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. But what if they see us? What if they stop the car? They won't, Julian said, reaching over to briefly touch my trembling hand. They think you're a helpless 62-year-old widow who rides the bus or takes random rides home. They don't know I've been logging their patterns just like they've been logging yours. 10 minutes later, we turned onto my street. The mature oak trees cast long, skeletal shadows under the flickering, amber streetlights. The block was dead silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of our windshield wipers. As we neared my Craftsman home, my throat tightened. There it was. The silver SUV was parked directly across from my driveway, its windows heavily tinted, the tailpipes releasing a faint, ghostly plume of exhaust. It was idling in the dark. Julian slowed the sedan down to a crawl, pretending to look for a house number as if delivering food. As our headlights swept across the silver vehicle, the dashboard camera captured everything: the out-of-state license plate, the scraped rear bumper, and the silhouette of a man sitting in the driver's seat. But as we passed my front yard, my eyes darted to the porch. My breath completely caught in my throat. The front door to my house was standing wide open. A pale yellow light spilled from the entryway onto the wet porch steps. Inside the hallway, a dark shadow moved past the window, carrying a heavy canvas bag. They weren't just waiting for me anymore. They were already inside, tearing my life apart looking for the evidence. Suddenly, the brake lights of the silver SUV flared a brilliant, angry red. The driver's side door slammed open, and a tall man stepped out into the pouring rain, staring directly into the windshield of Julian's car. He reached into his jacket, his eyes locked onto mine through the glass. Has Julian's car been recognized, and can they escape before the intruder closes the distance? Julian! He sees us! I screamed, ducking down into the leather seat as the man from the silver SUV stepped fully into the path of our headlights. The man was heavily built, wearing a dark waterproof jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His hand was firmly gripped around something heavy inside his coat pocket, and his gaze was completely murderous. He didn't hesitate. He took 3 long, aggressive strides directly toward the front bumper of Julian's sedan. "Hold on," Julian yelled. Instead of slamming on the brakes, Julian stomped on the accelerator. The engine roared, and the tires spun wildly against the wet asphalt before catching traction. The sedan surged forward, forcing the intruder to dive aggressively out of the way into the flooded gutter. We tore past my open front door, the tires throwing up a massive sheet of dirty water that sprayed against the side of the silver SUV. Through the rear window, I watched in absolute horror as the man scrambled back to his feet and sprinted to the driver's side of his vehicle. Within seconds, the silver SUV's high beams flashed on, blindingly bright, cutting through the heavy Seattle fog behind us. "He's pursuing us," I panicked, my voice cracking as I watched the 2 aggressive white lights close the distance in the rearview mirror. "Julian, he's going to ram the car." "He can try," Julian grunted, his face hardened into a mask of pure concentration. He threw the steering wheel to the right, taking a sharp, dangerous turn onto a narrow side street. The back end of our sedan fishtailed violently, the tires screeching against the pavement before straightening out. The silver SUV copied the turn perfectly, its massive frame leaning heavily into the corner. They were faster than us on the straightaways, and they had absolutely no intention of letting us reach a crowded area. "Why isn't anyone else on the road?" I cried, clutching the seatbelt as Julian took another blind left through a dark commercial district. "It's past midnight on a rainy Tuesday, Clara. This part of the city is a ghost town," Julian said, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "But we just fed that footage to the cloud. The license plate, the open front door, his face, it's all secure. I just need to get us to the precinct on 4th Avenue before he forces us off the road." Suddenly, a loud, metallic thud rattled the frame of the car. The silver SUV had accelerated out of nowhere, intentionally clipping our rear bumper. The impact sent a violent shudder through my spine, and the sedan began to slide sideways across the slick, wet asphalt, completely out of control. Can Julian regain control of the vehicle, or will the intruder terminate the chase right here in the dark? The headlights of the silver SUV spun violently across my vision as our sedan slid sideways down the rain-slicked avenue. The screech of the tires was deafening. For a terrifying second, I thought we were going to flip over entirely. But Julian didn't panic. He fought the steering wheel, pumping the brakes with a rhythmic precision born of decades of driving through these exact hazardous coastal winters. With a final, heavy groan from the suspension, the sedan gripped the asphalt again, straightening out just inches from a concrete light pole. "Clara, look in the glove box," Julian shouted, his eyes locked on the road ahead as the silver SUV surged forward to strike us again. "There's a heavy-duty flashlight. Grab it." My hands shook so violently I could barely release the latch, but I forced myself to reach inside. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal of a tactical flashlight. "I have it. What do I do?" "Aim it out the back window and strobe it directly into his windshield," Julian ordered, throwing the car into another hard left turn. "Blind him for just 5 seconds." I scrambled around in the seat, kneeling on the leather and facing the rear window. The massive grille of the silver SUV was practically breathing down our neck. I clicked the flashlight onto its high-intensity strobe setting and pressed it flat against the glass. The rapid, blinding bursts of white light illuminated the interior of the pursuing vehicle, revealing the driver throwing his hands up to shield his eyes. The silver SUV swerved erratically, its tires clipping the curb and slowing its momentum. "It worked. He's dropping back," I yelled. "Good, because we're taking a detour," Julian said, his voice tightening. He sharply turned the sedan down a steep, narrow ramp leading into the underground parking structure of an expansive, dark commercial building. The darkness of the concrete garage swallowed us instantly. Julian immediately killed the sedan's headlights and coasted down the ramp using only the ambient, flickering emergency lights of the facility. He tucked the car into a deep, shadowed maintenance bay beneath a low-hanging concrete clearance beam. A second later, the heavy roar of the silver SUV's engine echoed through the entrance of the garage. The vehicle slowly crept down the ramp, its headlights cutting long, predatory beams through the damp air, searching the shadows for any sign of us. I held my breath, pressing my back against the floorboards of the car. Julian sat entirely motionless, his hand hovering over the gear shift. The SUV rolled past our hiding spot, barely 10 feet away. The low, deep rumble of its exhaust vibrated through the floorboards of our car. I could see the silhouette of the driver turning his head, looking right at us through the dark. Did the intruder spot them in the shadows, or will Julian's hiding spot save their lives? The heavy thrum of the silver SUV's engine seemed to vibrate right through my chest as it idled just yards away. The beams of its headlights cut through the damp air, illuminating the concrete pillars like skeletal fingers. I hid on the floorboards, pulling my coat tight around myself, terrified that the sound of my shallow, erratic breathing would give us away. Julian sat entirely rigid, his hand resting lightly on the emergency brake, his eyes tracking the red glow of the intruder's taillights in the side mirror. The SUV slowed to an absolute crawl. The driver was suspicious. He knew we had turned down the street, and an underground garage was the perfect dead end. The silver vehicle began to slowly reverse, its backup lights casting a cold, white glare directly into our darkened cabin. Through the gap between the seats, I saw the driver's window roll down. The man in the baseball cap leaned out, scanning the dark corners of the maintenance bay. Suddenly, a loud, echoing crash shattered the silence from the far side of the garage. The intruder's head snapped toward the noise. A stray alley cat had knocked over a stack of empty plastic recycling bins near the exit ramp. Without hesitating, the driver slammed the SUV into drive, the tires squealing against the smooth concrete as he tore toward the sound, believing we had made a run for the surface. "Now," Julian whispered. He didn't start the engine. He released the emergency brake and let the sedan quietly coast backward out of the maintenance bay, using the natural incline of the concrete floor. We rolled silently out of the shadow, keeping away from the exit where the SUV had gone. Julian waited until we reached the dark mouth of an old utility tunnel at the back of the facility before turning the key. The engine purred to life instantly. Instead of going up to the street where the man was waiting, Julian drove straight through the private, gated exit of the commercial building. "How did you know this tunnel was here?" I gasped, finally climbing back onto the seat. "I told you before, Clara, I worked maintenance for these commercial grids for 20 years, Julian said, a grim smile flashing across his face under the dashboard light. I know which basements connect, and I know which security cameras are monitored. We just bypassed his perimeter entirely. We're less than 4 blocks from the Central Police Precinct now. But as we accelerated onto the open avenue, my phone suddenly lit up in my lap. It was an unknown number. A text message popped up on the screen, containing just a single photograph. My stomach dropped into a bottomless void. The photo showed the interior of my living room. Sitting on my late husband Arthur's favorite armchair was my missing kitchen notebook, and resting right on top of it was a generic, unlabeled bottle of prescription pills. A second later, the phone began to ring. Who is calling Clara, and what horrifying ultimatum are they about to deliver? My hand shook so violently, I nearly dropped the phone into the footwell. Julian glanced down, his expression turning sharp as he saw the eerie green glow of the screen. Answer it, Clara, he said quietly, his eyes switching back to the road. Put it on speaker. I pressed the button with a trembling finger. The line crackled with a low, hollow hiss before a familiar, smooth voice broke the silence. It was a voice I had heard at family dinners and holiday gatherings. Clara, dear, Marcus Vance said, his tone dripping with a terrifying, artificial warmth. You aren't answering your front door. That's very unlike you. You're usually so terribly punctual. Marcus, I choked out, my voice cracking under the weight of the betrayal. I know what you did. I know about the audit. I know you stole the settlement money meant for Arthur and the others. A soft, dark chuckle echoed through the car's speakers. Arthur was a dreamer, Clara. He didn't understand how the world works, and clearly, neither do you. You should have just stayed a quiet clerk. You should have ignored the discrepancies. We have your man on video, Marcus, I said, trying to summon a courage I didn't feel. We have his face, his license plate, and your voice on an audio recording. We are driving to the Central Precinct right now. There was a long, chilling pause on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, the artificial warmth was completely gone, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp malice. You can walk into that precinct if you want, Clara, Marcus said slowly. But by the time the police dispatch a car to your house, it will already be too late. Look at the photograph I sent you very carefully. I looked down at the image of my living room. The bottle of prescription pills sat neatly on the table beside Arthur's chair. You're 62, Clara. You live alone in a rough neighborhood. You are deeply depressed over your husband's passing, and the financial strain is immense, Marcus whispered, his voice painting a horrific narrative. If you don't turn that car around right now and hand over your notes, my associate will make sure you are found tomorrow morning. A tragic, accidental overdose. A widow who simply couldn't bear the grief anymore. The police won't even question it. My blood ran completely cold. He had staged my entire house to look like a suicide. You have exactly 3 minutes to pull over and let my man collect you, Marcus hissed. If you don't, I will tell him to pull the trigger on a different plan. And trust me, Clara, you won't survive the alternative. The line went dead. The sudden silence inside the sedan was deafening. Will Clara give in to Marcus's terrifying ultimatum, or does Julian have one final card left to play? The dial tone echoed like a death knell in the quiet car. I stared at the phone, tears of absolute terror finally spilling over my cheeks. Julian, he's going to kill me, I sobbed, twisting the fabric of my coat in my hands. He's staged my home. He's going to make it look like I took my own life. If we don't turn around, his man will hide until morning and finish it. Julian's face was set like granite. He didn't slow down. In fact, he pressed harder on the gas, the sedan roaring past the dark storefronts of 4th Avenue. Marcus is a predator, Clara, and predators rely on your isolation, Julian said, his voice ringing with a fierce, protective intensity. He thinks you are alone. He thinks a 62-year-old woman has no one standing in her corner. But he doesn't know that my dashcam stream didn't just go to a private cloud. It went directly to a Federal Dispatch link. I blinked through my tears. What? 2 years ago, my own son was framed by a corrupt contractor after he tried to blow the whistle on a faulty building structure, Julian revealed, a deep, painful truth coloring his words. I didn't listen to him back then. I told him to keep his head down and mind his own business. Because of my silence, they ruined his career and drove him out of the state. I promised myself I would never let an innocent person fight a corrupt system alone again. Julian reached over, tapping the dashboard screen. A map interface flickered to life, showing 3 blinking blue indicators rapidly closing in on our position, and 2 more swarming directly toward my residential street. When I started tracking Marcus's associate 3 weeks ago, I didn't just take notes, Julian explained. I filed a formal report with the state's white-collar crime division. They've been building a racketeering case against Marcus's firm for months. Our live video of the break-in tonight was the final piece of probable cause they needed for an emergency intervention. Just as he spoke, the bright, flashing emergency lights of 3 unmarked police cruisers lit up the fog ahead of us. They formed a tight, protective barricade right outside the entrance of the central precinct. Julian pulled the sedan into the center of the flashing lights, bringing the car to a smooth halt. Immediately, armed officers moved past us, their tactical gear glistening in the rain as they prepared to secure the perimeter. A detective tapped on my window. But even as the safety of the precinct surrounded us, my phone buzzed violently in my hand once more. It was a live video alert from my own home security app. The camera in my hallway showed the intruder standing by the front door, his head turned toward the street as the faint, distant echo of police sirens began to wail in the background of my quiet neighborhood. Is the intruder trapped inside Clara's house, and will Marcus Vance finally face justice for his crimes? The live video feed on my phone screen was mesmerizing and terrifying. Inside my dimly lit hallway, the intruder stiffened. The distant, overlapping wails of police sirens grew louder, bouncing off the walls of my quiet neighborhood. He realized the trap had reversed. He panicked, dropping the heavy canvas bag and sprinting toward the kitchen door, but the screen suddenly exploded with motion. Federal agents and local police kicked through my front door and windows simultaneously. Within seconds, the intruder was pinned to the hardwood floor, his wrists bound in heavy steel cuffs. The detective standing outside Julian's car window gently opened my door. Clara Vance? You are entirely safe now. We have the intruder in custody at your residence, and a separate tactical unit has just arrested Marcus Vance at his penthouse downtown. A long, shuddering breath escaped my lips, and the heavy weight of fear that had anchored itself in my chest for months finally dissolved into tears of relief. The weeks that followed the raid felt like a blur. The federal investigation into Marcus's law firm revealed a massive, decade-long conspiracy. They uncovered hundreds of altered civil settlement files, hidden ledgers, and shell corporations. Marcus hadn't just stolen from me. He had siphoned millions of dollars from vulnerable families, injured workers, and elderly widows who didn't have the resources to fight back. My work at the archive, combined with Julian's meticulous notes and audio recordings, formed the unbreakable backbone of the prosecution's case. Marcus Vance was stripped of his license and sentenced to consecutive federal terms, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind concrete walls. I didn't return to my house right away, but when I finally did, it felt different. The locks were reinforced, and new security lights lit up the yard, but the suffocating silence was gone. It was replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Julian and I kept our routine, but our dynamic changed completely. I moved from the back seat to the front passenger seat. We spent our 20-minute drives talking about everything and nothing at all. Inspired by what we went through, Julian finally reached out to his estranged son, sending him the news articles detailing how his alertness had saved a life. His son called back the very next day, and they began the slow, beautiful process of rebuilding their relationship. I am 63 years old now. I still live in my craftsman home, and I still work the night shift because the archive needs honest eyes. But I no longer look at the world as a place where you must survive alone. Evil rarely arrives with a loud warning. It creeps into our lives through routine, hiding in the dark corners of a busy, indifferent city. Safety isn't found in thick locks or isolation. It is found in connection. It is found when a lonely widow decides to share a warm travel mug of tea And when a tired night driver chooses to look closer, listen longer, and care about a stranger. Kindness didn't just interrupt my routine that rainy Tuesday night.
It rewrote my ending.
It gave me my life back. Thank you for watching Clara's true story. Her life was saved because two strangers chose to look out for one another in a dark world. What is the biggest lesson you took away from her journey? And where are you watching from tonight? Let me know your city and thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories on true life dramas.